welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a really significant area within healthcare, the market for treatments for psoriatic arthritis. Experts are projecting this global market to hit, what, $12.62 billion in 2025?
Yeah, that's a massive figure. It really tells you a lot, doesn't it, about the prevalence and the sheer amount of innovation happening.
It really does. Highlights the global effort,
Mm-hmm.
to develop and provide effective therapies for people living with psoriatic arthritis.
So many people affected.
Exactly. So we've basically sifted through a recent pretty in-depth market report
Okay.
to bring you the crucial insights. We're going to explore where this market stands right now, the significant growth that's anticipated.
And the factors driving it all.
Yeah, exactly. The key factors driving these trends across different parts of the world.
In this report, it sounds like it covers a lot of ground.
It does.
Market size, that CAGR, the growth rate, different drug types, how they're given.
Right. Administration routes, distribution channels.
And, the regional breakdown, company profiles, it's pretty comprehensive.
Definitely. So our goal today, our mission, let's say, is to just cut through all that data.
You get to the core of it.
Yeah, deliver a clear, concise understanding of the dynamics shaping this market now and in the coming years.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Sounds good. Where do we start? Global picture.
Let's start with the big picture, the global market overview.
Okay. So the report confirms that number you mentioned. Globally, USD 12.62 billion in 2025.
Right.
But what's really interesting is the growth forecast looking ahead.
Absolutely. We're looking at a pretty substantial increase. It's projected to reach USD 26.66 billion by 2033.
Wow. So more than double.
Yeah, with a compound annual growth rate, that CAGR, of 9.8% between 2025 and 2033, that's a really significant expansion.
It is. And the report directly links that growth, that boost in sales, as they put it, to the rising number of people being diagnosed worldwide. Makes sense. Higher prevalence means more need for treatment. Simple as that, really.
Yeah.
It's also helpful to, frame the timeline here. The baseline year is 2024.
Right.
They looked back from 2021 to 24 for historical data. 2025 is the estimate, and the forecast runs out to 2033.
Okay, so that gives us context for these numbers.
Exactly. So now let's drill down a bit, regionally, starting with North America.
Sure. North America, it's the biggest slice of the pie right now, over 40% of the global market.
40%. Wow.
Yeah. And in 2025, the market size there is projected at USD 4.67 billion.
And it's still growing steadily.
Yep. An anticipated CAGR of 8.2% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay. And within North America, the U.S. is obviously the giant.
Dominant, yeah.
Yeah.
About USD 3.68 billion projected for 2025. The CAGR is a little lower, though, 8.0%.
Still strong. And Canada and Mexico?
They're significant, too. Canada is projected at around 560 million in 2025 with a 9.0% CAGR. Mexico, about 425 million, 8.7% CAGR.
Okay, so what's putting North America in that top spot? What are the drivers?
Well, several things. The report points to, like we said, the increasing number of diagnoses,
Right.
but also a very high adoption rate of biologics.
Those more complex, often injectable treatments.
Exactly. They target specific immune system parts, tend to be pricier. Plus, you've got huge R&D spending in North America.
And the FDA approval process.
Relatively quick approvals help too, and just the scale. The report mentions almost 600,000 Americans living with PSA.
600,000. That really puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hop across the pond to Europe.
Okay. Europe is the second largest market, over 30% share.
30%, so still very significant.
Definitely. Projected market size of USD 3.66 billion in 2025.
And their growth, also strong.
Yeah, pretty robust. An expected CAGR of 8.8% through 2033.
And I imagine there are variations within Europe itself.
Oh, for sure. You see some big differences. Like the UK market is projected around 615 million for 2025 with a strong 9.6% CAGR.
Okay.
Germany's even larger, maybe 725 million, 9.0% CAGR.
And France, Russia.
France, about 337 million, 8.0% CAGR. Russia, quite large too, around 567 million, but slightly slower growth at 7.8%.
Interesting.
And even smaller countries like Luxembourg showed decent growth, around 44 million, 9.1% CAGR.
So what are the key drivers pushing the European market forward?
Well, similar themes to North America, really. Rising prevalence, definitely. Growing awareness of the condition,
Okay.
big advancements in treatment options, those biologics again, and other targeted therapies becoming available.
And healthcare spending, reimbursement.
Yeah, increased healthcare spending helps, and generally favorable reimbursement policies in many countries make it easier for patients to access these often expensive treatments.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift focus now. Asia Pacific, APAC. Sounds like things are really moving there.
Yeah, APAC is definitely one to watch. Currently holds about 23% of the market.
Good.
Projected size of around USD 3.03 billion for 2025. But here's the key thing. This is where the fastest growth is expected.
The highest AGR globally.
That's what the report forecasts. A remarkable 12.6% CAGR from 2025 to 2033.
Wow, 12.6%. That's substantially higher than North America or Europe,
It really is. And it's driven by several key markets within APAC.
like China and India.
Exactly. China's huge, projected at 1.27 billion in 2025, 12.1% CAGR. India, smaller market size, around 303 million, but a massive 14.5% CAGR forecast.
14.5%. Incredible. What about Japan? Australia?
Japan's significant too, about 418 million, 11.1% CAGR. Australia, around 158 million, 11.9% CAGR. Even Singapore, smaller market, 60 million or so, but a 12.9% CAGR.
It's really a mix of factors. Growing awareness is key, obviously. Healthcare infrastructure is improving rapidly in many countries. Access to medications is getting easier, especially in places like China and India.
Okay.
Then you have Japan's established pharma sector. Australia and New Zealand are adopting biologics quickly.
Yeah, just population growth, more
Really?
approvals. Yeah, rising population overall, plus more new drug approvals coming through. It all adds up to this really dynamic growth picture.
It really does.
Okay.
Fascinating. Let's turn our attention now to South America.
Okay, South America accounts for just over 5% of the global market. Projected size around 480 million USD in 2025.
Still a decent chunk. And the growth there?
Also quite strong. A CGR of 10.5% expected through 2033.
And the key players, Brazil and Argentina.
Seems so. Brazil's projected at roughly 205 million in 2025 with an 11.1% CAGR. Argentina, smaller at about 80 million, but an even higher CAGR forecast at 11.4%.
And the drivers in South America. Similar patterns.
Pretty much. Increasing incidence, so more cases being reported. Growing awareness helps with diagnosis.
Right.
Improving access to healthcare is a factor, plus new treatments becoming available. And in some countries, a growing middle class means more people can potentially afford these therapies.
Okay. Let's look quickly at the Middle East.
The Middle East is smaller, around 2% of the global market. Projected size just over 500 million USD in 2025.
2%. But what about growth?
Growth looks good, actually. An expected CGR of 11.1% from 2025 to 2033.
So growing faster than North America or Europe.
Yeah, slightly faster rate. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are highlighted.
What are their numbers looking like?
Saudi Arabia, around 178 million projected for 2025, 11.4% CGR. UAE, about 104 million, 11.6% CAGR.
And the drivers there, increased spending.
Yeah, rising healthcare spending across the region is a big one. Developing infrastructure makes things more accessible.
Awareness, too. Demand for advanced treatments.
Exactly. Greater awareness and definitely a rising demand for those advanced treatments like biologics.
Got it. And finally, Africa.
Africa is the smallest market share, around 1%. Projected size about 278 million USD in 2025.
It's still growing.
Still growing, yeah. A DGR of 10.1% expected through 2033. South Africa and Nigeria are mentioned specifically.
Okay.
South Africa projected around 98 million in 2025, 11.0% CAGR. Nigeria smaller, about 22 million, 10.3% CAGR.
And the drivers in Africa? Same themes again.
Largely, yes. Rising prevalence, growing awareness are important. And crucially, the increasing availability of newer treatment options is helping drive growth there, too.
Okay, so wrapping up the regions. Across the board, rising prevalence and awareness seem to be universal drivers.
Definitely common threads.
What about the sort of overall market boosters and maybe any brakes on growth mentioned in the report?
Yeah, so beyond prevalence and awareness, the big driver is just the sheer advancement in treatments, more effective drugs coming online.
Right.
On the flip side, the main restraints mentioned are the high cost, particularly for those biologic treatments.
Which can limit access.
Exactly. And also potential side effects and adverse reactions associated with some of these powerful medications.
That makes sense. Okay, now let's dig into the specifics. Which parts of this market are growing fastest? Starting with, say, drug classes.
Sure. The report suggests that TNF inhibitors, a well-established class, are likely to stay dominant for a while.
Why is that?
Well, they have proven efficacy, sometimes fewer alternatives. They carry a high cost, which boosts market value.
Right.
And you're seeing biosimilar adoption increase in developed markets, while demand is growing in emerging ones, too.
Okay, so TNF inhibitors are dominant, but what's the fastest growing category?
That would be the interleukin
Ah,
inhibitors.
okay. What makes them stand out?
They target specific inflammatory proteins very effectively. They're showing great results in reducing joint pain, swelling, stiffness.
And skin symptoms, too.
Yeah, importantly, they often help with the psoriasis skin symptoms that many patients have, and some might even help prevent joint damage. That broad effectiveness is really pushing their rapid growth.
Very interesting. Okay, how about how these drugs get to the patient, the route of administration?
Well, the parenteral segment, so injections or infusions, currently holds the largest market share.
Why parenteral?
Often it's about getting the drug into the bloodstream quickly, bypassing digestion. Plus, many of those advanced high-cost biologics we talked about are given this way.
Okay. But are other methods growing? Pills, maybe?
Absolutely. The oral segment, medications taken by mouth, is expanding rapidly.
Convenience factor, I imagine.
Huge convenience factor,
Yeah.
less invasive. And we're seeing more effective oral therapies specifically for psoriatic arthritis becoming available.
Good to know. And finally, how do these drugs actually reach people? The distribution channels.
Right now, hospital pharmacies have the biggest share.
Makes sense for serious conditions, specialized staff.
Exactly. Hospitals often manage the more complex cases and dispense these systemic medications.
But things are changing there too, I bet. Online.
Definitely. Online pharmacies are the fastest growing distribution segment.
Convenience again. Accessibility.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Especially helpful for people in rural areas or those who find it hard to get to a physical pharmacy. That whole digital shift is hitting healthcare too.
It really seems like it. Okay, shifting gears slightly, the companies involved. What's the competitive scene like?
It's described as fiercely competitive, lots of focus on R&D, trying to find the next breakthrough.
So the big pharma players are heavily involved.
Oh, yeah. Major companies offering everything from biologics to older DMARDs, corticosteroids, and lots of strategic moves happening.
Like partnerships, mergers.
Exactly. Strategic alliances, mergers, acquisitions, all aimed at strengthening their position, expanding their offerings.
The report mentioned a couple of recent examples.
It did. One was Wellman Health partnering with Versus Arthritis back in September 2023 on a digital support program.
Okay.
And another, more recently, February 2024, Biocon Biologics making a deal with J&J, or Janssen Biotech, to commercialize a biosimilar BMAB 1200 in the U.S.
So real-world examples of that dynamic activity.
Yeah, it shows how active the space is.
Okay, so let's try to wrap up our deep dive here. The big takeaway seems to be this global market for psoriatic arthritis treatments is definitely set for some major growth.
For sure. And it's really being pushed by, well, more people being diagnosed and these continuous advancements in the treatments themselves.
Yeah, and we've seen there are really notable differences region by region, right? In growth rates, market sizes.
Reflecting things like local healthcare, prevalence, access to meds.
And we highlighted some really interesting specifics like APAC being the fastest growing region overall.
Right, and those interleukin inhibitors as a rapidly rising drug class.
And just the sheer scale in places like the US and China. It really emphasizes how important this therapeutic area is, both medically and economically.
Absolutely. So for you listening, if you're looking to get a handle on this market, hopefully this gives you the key trends, the main figures shaping the world of PSA therapeutics right now.
So thinking about all this, the growth, the research, here's maybe a final thought for you to chew on. What kind of future breakthroughs might we actually see in the next decade or even beyond 2033? Could we be looking at even more targeted, maybe personalized therapies? And how would that further reshape this already massive multi-billion-dollar market? Definitely something to consider.